My dad emptied my college fund to pay his loans, then blamed me for being ungrateful in court. I never thought I'd be in a place where I would have to put this into words, but lately the only way I can process what happened is by talking about it. Maybe it will help me figure out if I'm actually crazy like my dad has been saying, or if I just grew up in a family where gaslighting was the normal language spoken in the house. So for context, my grandparents set up a college fund for me when I was really young. They weren't rich, but they were smart and consistent. Every birthday, holiday, and whenever they had extra, they put money in that account for me. By the time I was a senior in high school, it had grown to something like $65,000. It was supposed to be untouchable until I graduated and enrolled in school. I never thought to check on it because I trusted my dad, who was the one listed as the adult custodian. He would always say things like, "We're making sure you'll never start life in debt," or "You'll thank us when you're in college and not worrying about loans." I found out the truth in the worst way. I had already been accepted into a state university. Not Ivy League, but still a solid school with a good program in my field. I went to pay the first tuition installment, and the financial office told me the account was empty. I thought it was a mistake. I remember standing at that desk, sweaty, shaking, thinking the system was wrong. They printed me the statement and handed it to me. Zero balance. When I confronted my dad, he looked at me like I had asked him for a kidney. He sat down on the couch, put his hands behind his head, and just said, "Yeah, I used it. I had to pay off my loans and credit cards. It was the responsible thing to do. You'll understand when you're older." I swear in that moment I felt like the ground fell out from under me. My mom just stood in the kitchen pretending to dry a dish that was already dry, not saying anything, like she wanted to melt into the wall. I yelled. I told him it wasn't his money, that it was mine. He laughed and said, "You're too young to know what's yours. Everything I've ever done for you came out of my pocket. You're acting entitled." That word, entitled, has haunted me for years. I was 18, watching my entire future evaporate, and he made me feel like a spoiled brat for being upset. It didn't stop there. My grandparents found out because I broke down crying when they asked about my dorm. They were furious. They tried to reason with him, but he doubled down. He told them, "She doesn't appreciate what I sacrifice. She can work her way through school like I did. Builds character." Which was rich, considering he hadn't actually worked his way through anything. He'd taken loans and then gambled away a lot of money over the years. My grandparents ended up taking him to court to try to recover the money. Since I was technically the beneficiary, I had to be part of it. That was one of the most humiliating and painful experiences of my life. Sitting there, listening to my dad's lawyer argue that I was ungrateful and immature, and that my dad had every right to use the money because he was the custodian. The way he twisted it made me feel like I was on trial for being a bad daughter. My dad wouldn't even look at me during those sessions. He stared straight ahead with his jaw clenched, like I was some stranger trying to ruin him. The judge ended up ruling that because my dad was the custodian, he technically had legal control, even though it was morally disgusting. There was no real way to force him to put the money back. The account was gone, and so was my trust. After that, my relationship with him was shattered. He would send me texts calling me dramatic, selfish, even un-American because I wasn't willing to start from the bottom and grind. He acted like I had betrayed him by even being upset. He'd show up at family gatherings and loudly joke that I was the spoiled kid who sued her own dad because she didn't want to work. Everyone laughed awkwardly, but no one corrected him. My mom would whisper to me later that she wished he wouldn't say things like that, but she never once told him to stop. I worked full-time for 2 years before I could even enroll in community college. I cried almost every night that first year watching my friends go off to universities, living in dorms, building memories, while I was clocking in at a retail job and eating ramen in my childhood bedroom. I felt like I had been robbed, not just of money, but of time and opportunity. Even now, years later, it still follows me. I managed to get my degree eventually, but it took me almost twice as long because I had to stop and save in between semesters. I never got the college experience. I was exhausted and bitter most of the time, surrounded by 18-year-olds when I was already in my mid-20s. And my dad never once apologized. Not once. He still claims he saved me because I learned the value of money. I don't talk to him anymore. I see my mom occasionally, but it's strained. She tells me he still brings me up at barbecues, usually as some kind of joke about kids these days. The last time I saw him, he actually said, "You should be thanking me. I set you up for real life." I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. I think what hurts the most isn't even the money itself, though that set me back in ways I'll never fully recover from. It's the way he took something my grandparents had worked so hard to give me, twisted it into some moral lesson, and then tried to convince everyone I was ungrateful for being angry. It feels like my whole family just stood by while he rewrote the story to make me the villain. Sometimes I wonder if I overreacted. If maybe I should have just swallowed it, called it a loss, and kept him in my life. But then I remember the look on his face the day I found out, how smug he was, how he laughed when I begged him to explain. That wasn't love. That wasn't protection. That was betrayal. I don't know if I'll ever forgive him. And honestly, I don't know if I want to.